Good evening, everyone. My name is Zach, and I'm here with the Ohio Green Party, specifically the Youth Caucus of the Ohio Green Party. I am joined by Austin, Marco, and Dawn. We're all just going to kind of go around and introduce our positions and kind of who we are. So, Austin, we'll start with you.
Hi, my name is Austin Bayshore. I'm a Central Committee member of the Ohio Green Party representing Kent. I ran for state representative in 2018 under the Green Party banner. I did not win, but I did pretty well for a district that was 90% Trump. I am also the liaison officer for the Young Greens of Ohio and the international co-chair of the Green Party of the United States. So I want to thank you all for tuning into our live stream today about Native American rights, Native American issues, and I hope we have a good discussion.
Marco.
Hi, my name is Marco Aiello. I've been in the Ohio Youth Caucus for the Green Party for about a year or two now. I am the co-chair representing Dayton, Ohio. I'm currently in school for political science and history, so I plan to actually use that more in the political stream representing the Green Party.
And last but definitely not least, our very special guest, Dawn.
Kwekwe, Endeluizi Don Neptune Adams, Nijiao Banawebskewi, Skishinaweapid, Bakamp Dorum. Hello, my name is Don Neptune Adams. I am Penobscot. I come from the Fisher clan. I'm so happy to be here with you today. And I'm really, really impressed at the representation of the youth. This is really, really cool. I'm impressed with your bios and I can't wait to hear more about you.
Thank you so much, Dawn. So today's theme is going to be Native American and Indigenous peoples kind of issues and things surrounding their community. I'm going to start with you when we're going to answer some questions here. There's about 6 questions on the roster, so I'll just go ahead and start with the first one. The first one is, how is the government contributing to the oppression of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities?
Okay, where do I begin? Okay, so colonialism brought several forms of genocide to this country. It started out with outright murder. There was a bounty put on my ancestor's head, and that is detailed in the short film Bounty, which is put out by Upstander. I can put the link in the chat a little later. It went from outright murder to other forms of genocide. Our ancestors were, it's going to take me more than 2 minutes to go through everything, but genocide continues in many different forms. There's cultural genocide that is happening. There is lots of economic, issues. We have healthcare issues. I know of an elder who was on the waiting list for a knee replacement, and she was turned down several times. Everybody thinks that we are so lucky we get free healthcare from the federal government, but there's a saying in Indian country, don't get sick after June. And that's because that's when the funding runs out. We're actually more oppressed by the state here than we are by the federal government, in that the state does everything to keep us under its jurisdiction, meaning that my tribe isn't allowed to take advantage of federal legislation that all the other 570 something plus federally recognized tribes benefit from. One of those is, an example would be the Stafford Act, which is emergency funding in the case of, anything happening. We don't get that kind of help because we're not able to take advantage of federal legislation. I could go on and on, but I yield my time.
Thank you so much for that. Marco, what about you? How is the government contributing to the oppression of Indigenous peoples and their communities?
There are plenty of ways our government contributes oppression to Indigenous peoples, whether it's through pipelines messing up water supply, like in Hawaii, where the military bases, like oil is going into the water system and even hurting people living on military housing and indigenous people. Tourism is a different story in Hawaii too. It's messing with the indigenous population. Even what Don said with healthcare, where many indigenous tribes or people living in those areas get rejected through healthcare. I'm not really vast enough on the indigenous stuff except for like the basic stuff like the healthcare in Hawaii. So I'm trying my best to do this.
Sure.
Yep, on my time.
Thank you. Austin?
There are so many examples to where the federal government gave Native tribes the most unfarmable, unlivable land that nobody else would live on. Even today, we're seeing issues, something as simple as drinking water, something that should not be a problem anywhere in the world in 2023. But 30 Native American tribes in California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, they have all filed petitions because the government doesn't even guarantee their right to clean drinking water. And it has a whole myriad effect of health, including issues, even getting corona testing, COVID-19 emergency funding, diabetes healthcare, gastrointestinal diseases are most common with these places that don't have clean drinking water. So the effects of the long-term effects of colonialism and colonization are still to this day happening in many places in the southeast of the United States and in New England.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. Moving on to the next question is, how does the current state of the economy impact Indigenous communities? Dawn, I'm going to start with you. You're muted. You're muted, Dawn.
Thanks for letting me know before I got halfway through my answer.
No worries.
That's my usual. So economically, I can speak to that. Our biggest problem is environmental racism in terms of nearby polluting industries. And I live in a very rural place. It's not, you know, we have big cities, but they're 3 hours south of here. The employment is linked to these polluting industries. And of course, they're always located right near our reservation. Just a mile north of here is the Juniper Ridge landfill. And that is the biggest polluter of the river. I live on an island in the middle of the Penobscot River, and that's our reservation. So a mile upriver, we have the Juniper Ridge landfill, which is a state-owned, privately run landfill. The rain that trickles down through the landfill and picks up chemicals along the way collects at the bottom, and that is pumped out and taken to a wastewater treatment plant that is a mile south of here. It's at a paper mill. That paper mill wastewater treatment plant was never meant for treating the 97 plus chemicals in those in that leachate. So we're pretty much surrounded by this poison here. We're only allowed to eat 1 fish per month out of the river. Yeah, it's really bad. But economically, we become the target of you know, racism when we complain about it, because people need jobs. I think that a big push for green technology and green jobs would solve this, at least partially. But yeah, environmental racism is when industries are purposely put near Indian reservations or other marginalized and targeted communities. And this is an economic reality for us.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Marco, what about you?
There are plenty of ways for economic reasons the government impacts the indigenous community. Like the biggest one I can think of is the Keystone Pipeline. It goes through indigenous communities and affects the environment and their water for oil, just for profit reasons. This pipestone was controversial for that, and the government has stopped it for a little bit, but then it is now up again. But people have argued that it contributed to the inflation in the past by stopping it when it didn't. The government just gives out more contracts for pipelines to be built, so they go over indigenous communities. It is harming them, their environment, and their drinking water, and it is killing and making Native Americans sick.
Thank you. Austin?
There are way too many factors to discuss in just this short 30-minute live stream, but Native Americans have some of the lowest socioeconomic factors out of any population in the United States, and that is 100% by design. People don't just slip and fall into poverty and these types of living conditions. They are shoved. The 2018 labor statistics reported that a lot of Native Americans faced absolute poverty, an unemployment rate of 6.6%, which is double than that of white people. The poverty rate for Native Americans is 25%, over 3 times the poverty rate of white people. Only 14% of Native Americans have some type of higher education, bachelor's degree or higher. The current Supreme Court ruling against affirmative action absolutely will 100% harm our Native communities, first and foremost. And it just all boils down to the fact that in this country, we have an imperial power structure that prioritizes profit over human lives, over the first progenitors of this land. And it's really concerning. And that's why we as Greens need to stand up and say, hey, this is not okay. These people were here long before any of us arrived. We need to take care of them. We need to be able to make sure that they have a life above poverty and that they're treated like the human beings that they are.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to move on to our third question, which is, what is historical trauma and how are Indigenous individuals and communities affected by it? Dawn, I'm going to ask you first.
So there's a book called Survivor's Cafe. And in that book, it talks about a study in which mice were studied for traumatic response and how that affects their genetics. What they did was they sprayed orange blossoms scent, the scientists, and then they inflicted trauma upon the mice. And what they found was that 3 generations of these lab mice later, the progeny of the original mice had a trauma response to the scent of orange blossom. Trauma is woven into our DNA, not only Native American people, but everybody. We just manifest it in different forms and have, a different set of, difficulties that go along with it. Intergenerational trauma is responsible for just about, if you can think of any issues that aren't caused by government and genocide, intergenerational trauma causes the rest. Yeah, I'm speaking for myself personally, but I have experienced intergenerational trauma from cultural genocide that is still happening in this country. I was put in foster care when I was 4 years old, non-native foster care. I was separated from my family and my culture, and that reverberates through time. I have a 14-year-old son, and he is also affected by that because I wasn't able to teach him the language and culture. Luckily, I moved home 2 weeks before he was born, and I've had the help of my own tribal elders. But I see it's okay, go ahead. I see the effects of intergenerational trauma in my everyday life.
Thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate that perspective. Marco?
Historical trauma to me is like trauma. Trauma affects multi-generations of people, and it'll still affect them throughout their lives, even their kids' kids. Like I'm gonna use slavery for example. Africans are torn from their homes in Africa and brought to America, and now many of these children or like African Americans today share like the last name of the slave master, and they can't date back any of their roots or past families where they're from in Africa. So it still affects them because they don't know where they came from. They don't know their cultures or what their bloodline really came from.
Moving on to Austin. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you not done?
Yeah, I'm done.
I'm really sorry. No.
Okay.
No. Austin?
Linguistically speaking, in order for people to have a culture, they have to have a language, a shared way of communicating. There were 245 distinct indigenous languages in the United States. However, 65 of them are already completely extinct, with another 75 nearing the point of extinction, with only a few native speakers remaining of those languages. And just having language, a shared way of speaking with each other, is the crux of humanity. That's what makes us human, talking to each other. So this sheer fact that a lot of Native American languages are going extinct, or it's spoken by two people that are over 100 years old and live 50,000 kilometers away from each other, it's really concerning. As myself, someone who studies languages, I went to college for linguistics, English education. It's really concerning that this is happening and has been happening. Again, this doesn't happen by accident. These are strict choices that somebody in the past made, and now we're having to deal with those choices, and hoping that someday we can overcome what happened in the past and move towards a more peaceful and equitable future together.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. How has the SCOTUS case, ICWA, affected Indigenous individuals and communities? Dawn?
Recently, Brackeen versus Holland was decided, and it was upheld. The law, the Indian Child Welfare Act law, was upheld. This was a benchmark case that was decided in 1978 after a lot of testimony in Congress from Indigenous families who had had their children taken away from them and put in the foster care system. I can't remember the name of the case. I think it was Zinke in Texas. It was, you know, a difficult circumstance that family was going through. But it is proven that when a child has access to their family and their culture and their tribe, that stays with them for life. there have been some really great advancements here where I live. But ICWA, the basic thing to know about ICWA is that the tribe is the child's third parent in any, child protective service case or, anything like that. So the tribe can advocate for the child, make sure that the foster parents have a Wabanaki liaison who helps provide the child with resources for staying connected. There are, oh, my mind just went blank. I can't remember the other things I was going to say, but I think I've said enough. The basic thing about ICWA is that the tribe is the child's third parent.
Thank you so much. Marco?
ICWA, at least the case that was upheld, affects the indigenous communities by people able to rip indigenous children from their homes, and they're be disconnected from their culture, language, and what goes on. And people that are from that tribe, they don't get to see them. I bring this back to the slavery thing of people being ripped from Africa. Those people were ripped or being ripped from their homes, just as how Africans are ripped from their homes, being disconnected from their culture. And that's another way of creating historical trauma within those children, and those children's children will potentially experience that trauma.
Great. Thank you so much. Austin?
Yeah, the upholding of ICWA, Indian Child Welfare Act, is very important. As they said, it's an act by Congress that makes the federal government the last line for child protective services or any type of adoption agencies, taking children out of their homes, putting them into unfamiliar situations where they're not connected to their culture, they're not connected to their people, they're not connected to their language, is very detrimental. It has been used throughout history to assimilate various ethnic groups into each other. But yeah, as Don said, it makes the tribe the third parent in a case like this. And we have a lot to learn from these types of communal parenting. It takes a town to raise a child. There can be a whole nother live stream we have on the child foster or adoption services in the United States. But it's very important, especially in the Navajo Nation, where a lot of people, it always cycles back to the most basic aspect of clean water. Even in the Navajo Nation, federal estimates say that it will be $4 billion to give the Navajo Nation running water, which is more than that of the whole state of West Virginia. So it was good.
Great. All right, moving on to our final question of the evening. It's going to be, what are some ways we can spread awareness and draw attention to injustices that Indigenous communities face? Dawn, we're going to start with you again.
Well, I think the best suggestion that I would have for you is to connect in ways that are celebratory, such as the National Day of Mourning in Plymouth, so-called Plymouth, where on Thanksgiving Day, people get together and you can hear speakers talk about their own experiences. You can hear the true story of that holiday that's called Thanksgiving. There's a march around the town, and then everybody shares a meal at the church on the hill. I think that type of thing, if you can find that in your location, that kind of thing is the best way to learn. When you're sitting down for a meal with someone and you're breaking bread and talking. I think that's probably one of the best ways to learn about somebody else's culture. is through shared experiences. Another thing you can do is that I know personally myself as an activist and a journalist, covering environmental issues and how they relate to the Indigenous people here. One of the things that I do is put out a call to our allies. When we need help fighting the state government, which just happened recently, we put out a call for help, and our allies come and they show up. They show up in droves with signs. We recently had a battle with the state governor over LD 2004, which would have allowed us as Wabanaki people or Wabanaki tribes to take advantage of federal funding and other federal legislation. We've lost millions of dollars in funding because of this one law, one piece of legislation, the Maine Indian tribe, the Implementing Act, which was signed in 1980, put us under the state's thumb. Anyway, we put out a call for allies, and you should have seen the people at the State House. They were so beautiful. So if you hear a call put out for allyship, show up with a sign. It's definitely the best thing you can do. Have our backs.
Of course. Thank you so much. What about Marco?
There's many ways you can spread awareness. Is that a lot of people don't know about like what's gone on in this country. They don't know like the true history. They just know the the whitewashed version. I think one ways you can do is learn the history and spread it and show people what's actually gone on in this country. And Canada too. Canada has done its fair share of oppression towards the native population as well. I think spreading its history and just learning their experiences and talking to people about it will kind of try to open people's minds up towards the Native American population and advocate for them as well.
Austin, my bad.
We share a very special space here in the Green Party, to where we have a lot of our leaders are Native American. Our 2000 vice presidential candidate, our record-breaking vice presidential candidate in 2000, Winona LaDuke, is from the Ojibwe tribe. Dawn herself is from the main Native American tribes. We have a very special space here in the Green Party. Some of our best election results come from Native American reservation elections. In 2016, there was a county in Hawaii that's predominantly Native Hawaiian, and we received over 25-30% of the votes for president in that area. The area in which the Standing Rock Reservation in 2016, we received astronomically high vote share from the Native American tribes. So we have a very special place in the Green Party supporting our Native American tribes. Unfortunately, in Ohio, we only have one recognized tribe, the Shawnee people. However, I do believe their government leased reservation is not in the state. Ohio was one of the areas where a lot of Native American peoples were forced into and then forced out of a dozen years later. But there are tons of museums and historical places in Ohio in which you can visit and see for yourself how the First Nations peoples lived. The burial mounds are still there, even though they're trying to get rid of them. They're still here in Ohio. You can go and see them, the giant snake mounds. So I say just the best way to learn is just going and looking at some place, talking to the people, because the tour guides are still there. The Native peoples are still there. It's just the fact that they're not recognized by the state of Ohio. Also, I believe one thing that we can promote in the Green Party is giving representation to Native tribes, like we have in Maine, and doing good out of that representation, not having representation just to have representation, but doing actual good to where the Native tribes in the state can appoint special members of the State House that can go and advocate for their rights, their basic human rights as humans and human beings. So yes, the Green Party is a very special space in this issue.
Sure. All right, well, that concludes all of the questions for our live stream. The Young Greens of Ohio would like to extend our deepest gratitude to Dawn for joining us today. Thank you so much for being a part of this live stream. And yeah, that's all I have for y'all today. That's all we have. So.
Can I just say how impressed I am that with all of your answers and your questions, like the youth is seriously impressing me right now. I'm amazed.
Thank
Well,
you so much.
I expected you to be awesome, but yeah.
Thank you so much.
Really good.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next month for our live stream on the Green New Deal. Goodbye.